My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Ben Bugale, and you're listening to pixelprojectradio, a video game and video game club style podcast where we play and discuss and dissect and annihilate and conquer the games that we, and hopefully all of you, love too. Rick, what game are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking about the game At Dead of Night, which is very popular in the streaming community.
I actually didn't know that. I kind of knew that, but that was a really astute observation that you made. I've only seen one person stream it, actually. I don't know how many you've seen.
I've seen a couple. Like with most games, I look this up on YouTube just to see people's opinions, and there are a lot of playthroughs of it. And plus, to me, we'll get into the weeds with this a little bit, but just how this game plays, it to me feels like a game that was first and foremost made for streaming and for audiences to watch.
You know what? When you say that, and I think about my first experience with this particular game, that makes all the sense in the world to me, because there are parts of this game that I will just say now I enjoyed playing, but verily, the great majority I rather enjoyed watching. It was not lacking in entertainment to watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really damning with faint praise, saying like, it wasn't that fun to play, but it was fun to watch. Because I felt the same way, Ben. I genuinely felt the same way.
Yeah, it's hard to explain because I did have fun, but yeah, this is game number 2 in our 3-game installation for the month of October. These are spooky or scary games, and Rick, you and I were having a conversation about what that means. Would you like to lead us into battle with that a little bit?
Oh, geez, are we gonna just hit that right at the top here?
Let's smack it with a bat, why don't we?
Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to yes and but also but you just a little bit. Do you want to get our reviews, our little shorties out of the way first?
Yes. Would you like me to go first this time?
Yes, I would love for you to go first.
All right. And I'm going to say right now that my review of this game, I had a very reactionary initial review of this game, and I had to step back and I had to view it a different way. But before I do anything, I will say that I generally hate point-and-click games, especially in the horror genre. But this one might have changed a few things for me. So, all right, here's my not too short shorty, my 2-sentence shorty. A visually beautiful game set in an Art Deco-style hotel in modern times, At Dead of Night fuses film and video games in a masterful way, providing a North Star for the point-and-click horror genre. Never within the realms of being a caricature, this game shows severity and conviction, though it is plagued with, at times, an anti-intuitive logic and gameplay issues that should have been avoided. 8.4 out of 10 from me, Haas. It could have been more, and it was great for an FMV. What do you got?
So for the folks listening, sometimes Ben and I talk at length about the games that we're doing off the air, because we're friends in real life. We hug each other. But this game, we didn't talk about at all. So here's what I've got. And admittedly, I was towing the line of pretentiousness with this one, but if you'll bear with me, I think it's not without just cause, which is another game that we're not covering. Anyway, to me, At Dead of Night fails in 2 critical ways, as a horror fixture and as a video game. It is made for streaming piece that has an incredibly limited vocabulary and borrows greedily from horror tropes in an attempt to deliver atmosphere. The end product has the cadence of a horror game in the same way that a House of Cards is structurally sound. Just so, until it is met with minimum opposing force. 2.5 out of 10 for me. The lowest rating I think I've given a game so far.
That's an interesting review. But I can understand a lot of that, to be honest, with my own personal frustrations. But lay it on me.
Well, I was thinking about this so we were talking about the cat lady, and I was also talking with another friend about another game that I'm playing, that the story and writing and localization to English are all just horrible. but the gameplay is fun. And that's because, like, I think these games, any game, any art, anything, has the potential to affect different people in different ways, right? That's so, like, when I say I was a mark for some of what the Cat Lady was, or I'm a big mark for what Digimon Cyber Sleuth is, I'm able to enjoy those games when faced with their glaring problems. I am not a mark for a lot of this. I'm not a mark for jump scares. I'm not a mark for an amateur sense of production where there's no campiness. I like a good camp. I mean, we all love Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. It's campy.
See, I don't like camp at all.
I can get behind it if it's done well. Until Dawn is another great example that was in our poll, which I want to talk about the poll after we're done here. But
we can talk about the poll.
You know, and then also the made for streaming games, right? Games like this, games like Slender, games like Five Nights at Freddy's. These games that are sort of like tailor made to have somebody very reactionary playing them, and you know, yelling and screaming and being engaging, or not, but you know, preferably. I'm not a mark for those games. I have a very hard time enjoying them. It feels like empty calories to me. I have that written like way lower in my notes, but I'm just gonna throw that phrase out now. It feels like empty calories. You know, I want something more substantial when I'm playing something that's a scary game.
I can respect that entirely. You see, I hate and love jump scares at the same time, and so that made me like this game. But more than anything, I like games that I think meld jump scare with good story at the same time. So I'm really looking forward to Amnesia to that end. But I like Five Nights at Freddy's in part because of the jump scare, but more than anything, based on some of the, quote, truth that it's theorized that it's rooted in.
Well, the reason that Five Nights at Freddy's gets a mild pass from me, it's not a series that I hold with any particular affection, but what I like about it is the design and the general lore is unique enough, and you know, the design, the visual design is good. They're quite scary. I thought everything about this was generic at best, relying on tropes, or just outright bad at worst. The acting was really quite bad. The design, Jimmy looks ridiculous. At no point was I ever scared. Like, there's just so much about this that sits in this place of, like, I don't even want to call it amateurish so much as I want to call it mediocrity. And it just, I don't know. If you're not a mark for the streaming kind of game, I just think this might miss you.
Yeah, no, I feel you there. There were a lot of points in this game where I was rather exhausted. The acting, believe it or not, I was actually not that disappointed with, but that's also because I've seen some really horrendous things. I'm sure you have too. But when I think about other games that I've played and some of the acting or some of the voice acting, rate to tickle, it just, I go and she's going to come back every podcast episode for the rest. I'm just kidding, everyone. I'm kidding. You know, and I guess it was kind of ordinary or average or whatever the word could be for the rooms, but I thought generally I was rather pleased with the atmosphere of this game. But I mean, at the same time, originality is something to be spoken for, and perhaps this being a hotel in a scary sense is kind of a theme that has been used before.
And to be fair, it's not just the hotel. There's a hotel. He's getting possessed at some point. He had a troubled childhood, and then there's more that I have written down, but I'm not scrolling all the way down there right now. But there was just it felt like it opened up the big dictionary of horror, spooks and scares, and just kind of page after page.
I can feel that.
But speaking of that kind of thing, of opening the horror book, you wanted to kind of jump into a conversation of what makes a horror game.
Yeah. Well, you had started before when we were in the green room. Everybody, Rick and I were talking about what it means to be a horror game, and Rick was talking about the genre of horror, And I was talking about, well, maybe scary is a little bit better. So, Rick, I would love to hear you talk about, and I don't mean scary is better, but scary is an umbrella term that kind of covers a little bit more, I guess. Rick, I'd love for you to talk about what horror means to you. And that is horror, HORROR, not horror, WHORE.
I'm surprised it took us that long to make that joke.
Oh, I make that joke literally anytime I talk with someone about horror games. I'm like, you want to play a horror game? And I'm like, wait a minute. What did that sound like?
So this was actually kind of prescient. I was just yesterday listening to an interview with John Carpenter, right? Everybody knows John Carpenter, the composer for many film scores, but most notably Halloween, and also director of many different genres, but very much settled in the horror genre. His Twitter handle is The Horror Master, @TheHorrorMaster. And in the interview, this was on Bullseye with Jesse Thorne, although he wasn't doing the interview. In that interview, the interviewer, is talking about how horror is a bit of a limiting term and it exists across genres, right? And of course, John Carpenter is such a nice, sweet old man that he was like, oh, but I quite like horror movies. I like scary movies, because he's that kind of a wholesome old guy. But I was thinking about it, and, a base definition to me of horror is the notion of holding a mirror to the human condition and seeing all the ugly sides. What makes us uncomfortable, or what makes us, fundamentally scared, like in our bones, right? Is that a fair sort of assessment so far?
In my humble opinion, I think horror involves a dimension of graphicness, of immersion that is a little bit more splendid and striking. Personally, I just feel like it's a little bit more immersive to be true horror, but otherwise I think you're spot on. Like, it has to be thick.
I so desperately want to think of a horror movie that isn't graphic because I want to give you a counterpoint, and I know I've seen them, but I cannot for the life of me think of one right now.
And I don't mean like graphic, like hobo with a shotgun. I mean graphic. Graphic in like the 4K. Like, have you seen Us?
Yes, terrific.
That level of graphic, like it just pulls you in. It's not blood for the sake of blood. It's not gore for the sake of gore. It's like I've started watching the Squid Game, right? Which I don't know why everyone's talking about Splatoon. But no, I've started watching the actual Squid Game. And to me, it's appropriately graphic because it's accurate to what's real. So that, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is the human condition. It has to be organic.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, or at the very least, we're in the same paragraph. This notion of like horror existing across genres gels to me with that notion of holding up a mirror to the human condition and what makes us fundamentally uncomfortable. Because if you think about something like Squid Game, it's this dystopian society where capitalism breeds dread, right? That in and of itself can inspire dread and thus have an element of horror. Think of any, good rom-com. There's always some kind of a heartbreak. Is that not, in a way, inspiring dread and having some DNA of horror? I think that's a bit of a stretch. But the DNA exists more than in just black and white, is it a horror movie?
It's a few degrees removed, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's not as much, it's the anxiety side of horror when we have those moments in rom-com.
Precisely. Yeah, precisely so. I didn't get any of that with At Dead of Night. I think jump scares have their place, and there's nothing inherently wrong with them, but this game, to me, had it had a very limited vocabulary, and its two main verbs were jump scares and not being totally aware of your surroundings, right? So when you're turning, the motion is blurred a little bit. When you're approaching a new area, sometimes your back is just turned in a really weird way, so you can't see everything. And it uses those two arguably well, maybe less so with the notion of not seeing everything in your surroundings, but it doesn't use anything else. And to me, that doesn't, combined with the lore and the setting and the acting and what have you, it never made me feel fear or dread. It made me annoyed and anxious.
That's fair. And when you say these things, it makes me want to go back to my original review, which was like a 7, maybe a 6.5 on this game. Just saying. Because to be honest, there were moments in the game where I said, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, why am I? Which is not, why are we doing anything? Why don't we just quit the night shift when we're at Five Nights at Freddy's? You know what I mean? Like, why don't we just, I don't know, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah, you see the paycheck that you get at the end of that game. It is 100% not worth that.
Well, and that's because it apparently is supposed to take place in 1991, 1992. That's a whole nother thing, which I am not ready to go down because I will be here for an hour pointing violently in different directions about one of the backstories from the game theorists. Shout out to you, Matt, Pat, wherever you are. But no, Rick, there's a lot of fair arguments for me here, pal. A lot of fair points. These aren't arguments. These are just truths about the game. I think it does a lot of things really well, but and like blurred vision, like whenever you turn your head quickly, like I just did. Can you imagine it? Rick saw me do it in real time. That's fair. You got blur there, but like why you would exit a room without looking left and right. And I know we're getting into like the gameplay now already, so perhaps we should talk about it. But there are just some things that, this is when I talk about anti-intuitive. It's just not logical at every turn, which what game can be, but still.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And there are some instances, like the staircase is a good example. When you're going down it, when you stop at a floor, you do not stop at the floor in the way any normal human would. You kind of do an unnatural turn and just put your back to the door, which doesn't make sense because that's where he is, if he's going to be there, right?
Precisely where he's going to be. He's going to be where you can't see him or where he can see you. And,
I think it's a good idea to take that knowledge away from the player. I like that. I like a feeling of not being empowered in spooky games.
Yes.
But I think they could have done it in a different way, like maybe better level design or set design, I guess would be a more appropriate term. Or I don't know. I struggle to think of it on the spot, but I think set design would be the biggest one and most obvious one, certainly.
Do you mean like the hotel in which the game takes place?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm being real pretentious tonight. I should have just said level design.
Oh, that's okay. It's all right. You're fine. No, there's. So yeah, that's where the game takes place. By the way, as mentioned, I definitely had it in my review. But why don't we get to some gameplay points, Richard? Why don't we talk about it? So, At Dead of Night is a point-and-click style horror game augmented by these film scenes. Rick, you've told me that you're not necessarily fond of them. From what I've seen of a lot of acting, I was rather impressed. I was especially impressed by the shoestring budget that they used for some of the scenes. Apparently, one of the only scenes that was real, from what I learned, was the scene at the beginning at the desk with we'll get to that in the story, obviously, but apparently the desk was made out of cardboard and it nearly fell over while they were filming it. But that's in the review, I talked about it being a fusion of film and video game, and that is apparent throughout the entirety of the game. I guess FMV is the Christian name of the game style. It relies heavily upon pre-recorded video files to display action in the game, if you want the definition. So, as we were talking earlier, the game takes place in a hotel, the Seaview Hotel, and there are these souls, and this is not getting too far into the story, this is just what you're doing, this is the game you're playing. There are souls who need to be put to rest, and we'll name them later, and they have deaths that are tied to one man, our antagonist, Jimmy Hall. We are playing as a girl named Maya. That's kind of what we're playing.
Yeah, and when you said this is a point-and-click game, what that means is you don't move freely. And that's another thing with games that try to obscure the environment from you. I think this could have been made more powerful if it were a game where you could walk around freely and not point and click. But that's how you traverse. If you want to turn around, you have to click an arrow, or you position your mouse on the screen and the appropriate arrow appears. That's important because sometimes you'll get to a room, and instead of an arrow appearing to let you go into the room, it just gives you the option to turn around. So that's how you traverse. It's one click, one movement.
I appreciate the definition, Richard, because I realized that I just said what it was, and it's like, oh, it's point and click. And some people are sitting there going, I point and click every day, Ben. What the hell are you talking about?
So, Ben, you mentioned that there are spirits in this hotel, and there are 4 of them. Amy Bell, Dr. Bose, Harvey, and Rose Hall. Those are our 4 main spirits.
Yes, and if you're keeping track at home with your pen and paper, yes, Rose Hall and Jimmy Hall have the same last name, but we'll get to that in time. We have some items that join us along the way, which will explain how we get them when we get to the actual story. But we've got our ghost voice receiver. We have our own actual voice, which is a thing we use. Imagine that. We have these things called scrying mirrors, which they are supernatural means of seeing the future. There's this compass that's supposed to help us with finding where the spirits are, these spirits of unrest. We have keys. Actually, we have a master key to get us into room. And we have a master key, which gets us into rooms. But there are also other keys we can collect. And then there are plenty of items that we use as clues throughout the game. I liked the clue aspect of this game, Rick. What about you? What do you think?
I didn't mind the clue aspect. That master key, it sure is a master key, except when it decides not to be, huh?
Yeah, and we're not talking about the shotgun from Call of Duty, everybody. We're talking about the master key that you use to open all the doors in a particular building. In terms of the items, I don't know what your feelings were, Rick, but like for me, the compass was great until it wasn't.
The compass is fine. It was a means to an end. Maya is described as having powers, which I guess is the scrying mirror, and that just felt super shoehorned in just as a way to progress the story, because you never do anything with any kind of supernatural powers. I mean, even talking to ghosts is done through a machine, which, by the way, you will appreciate this on some level. Every time I booted up the machine, after like the 6th time, I found myself thinking, to me, this is just less fun and more work Phasmophobia. I'd rather be playing Phasmophobia, and I don't even like Phasmophobia very much. But at least then you're walking around freely. And that's a great example. That does obfuscation of the environment and a sense of kind of dread, I think, better than this one, Phasmophobia, does. And then there's also playing with your friends and,
Well, and in Phasmophobia, the place where it falls a little bit short in comparison, in my opinion, is the fact that, like, those are short missions. In this game, there's a little bit more investment. There's a little bit more hard world building to that end. But I don't disagree. I would have rather been playing Phasmophobia at a lot of points. I like the ghost voice receiver, and as somebody who has an extreme, I don't want to say maybe fascination, it's a whole thing, that my love and appreciation for the supernatural. I liked the idea of the spirit box. I thought it was a neat invention to have in this game, but I don't disagree. The scrying mirror did feel kind of shoehorned because in terms of gameplay, this game is very, very linear. It's not that you can't do some things and have some overlap, but it's not a game where, if you don't talk to someone the right way necessarily, that like it ruins everything. Like there are some different outcomes, but generally it's pretty straightforward. In terms of brokenness in gameplay, Rick, something I want to talk to you about. At one point, I had to quit and save the game to get something to progress. I don't know if you ever had that, but it drove me nuts. It happened one time.
Like core bugs and glitches, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, and I hadn't had many of them, but I had one, and it was literally to activate a scene.
I didn't have any hard bugs. I had to disable G-Sync on my NVIDIA control panel because without it, the game ran at a buttery smooth, like 12 frames a second, and it just looked horrible. Doesn't play nice with G-Sync, so if you've got an NVIDIA card or a G-Sync monitor, please keep that in mind. But no, not really any bugs.
I'm happy for you. I guess I kind of hinted, and we can talk a little bit about the fact that there are these memories, supernatural interactions that happen throughout the game because you're trying to contact these spirits, who we'll, again, go into more detail about later. For me, this was when I say anti-intuitive, is that activating some of these memories, you bring these spirits back and they reenact something that has happened. For me, it didn't jive or flow naturally at certain points, and that drove me nuts. Like, you have to enter this room and turn this way to make something happen. And I just thought, why don't I look in the direction? Isn't that enough?
And if there are 2 spots that you can stand in the room and you're in the wrong one, sorry, pal, you can't talk to the ghost. And that also kind of bleeds into my least favorite mechanic of the game, the question mechanics.
Tell me more.
This just halted all sense of progression to me. It's a good idea, but in execution, oh my goodness, it was never fun. It was just frustrating. So the question mechanics, when you find the new piece of evidence, let's say you find a broken cricket/baseball bat in the drawer, that is now a clue. When you make contact with a spirit on the ghost box, the talkie box, the ghost box,
the ghost voice receiver,
the spooky talkie,
the honk box.
So when you talk to a ghost on the spook honk, you can ask them about different clues that you found. And you need to do this to progress the game. 2 things about this that bugged me. Well, 3 things. One, the biggest one, total halt of any kind of progression and flow in the game. The 2 things that bugged me about it, though, in terms of how it worked, was there are some ghosts, one in particular, where if you ask them about a clue and it's not the right clue, they just say, maybe. And it's like, maybe? What the fuck do you mean? I'm talking to you. You could just tell me this stuff, you know?
Come on. You know you were there or you weren't.
Did that have anything to do with the fire? Maybe. What do you
say
mean,
I
maybe?
don't know. Come on.
Yeah, and I will admit I had times where I was like, this is a very video gamey thing. It's like, just ask them. Ask the ghost what happened. Why are we doing this puzzle? Like, I won't tell kind of deal. Get out of here. But the other thing that frustrated me was there's you have to put clues together, right? How did you feel about that?
So here's the thing. I can appreciate it. I don't want to say that it was a pioneer, but if it was the first to do it, props to you. So I liked it. And the clue idea, as you said, it's a great idea. But unfortunately, I think in this game, the second mouse gets the cheese. I'm sure someone will come along, use this mechanic of pairing clues, and use it in a way that is a lot more functional, a lot more intuitive. I loved the clues, but the problem is that you have to, because it is randomized. Exactly, Rick. You said earlier, like that items are not in the same place. It is completely randomized. So online game guides will not help you, for the record, because it changes for every playthrough. And I learned that too late. But I liked the clues, but I don't like the idea of having to comb through every single hotel room to find all of them.
And not to mention comb through every single item, because there's a ton of items. So 1 minute you'll be running away from Jimmy, who is going to get you. And it's creating this sense of tension. And then the next minute you're combing through your clues, kind of going through all like 50 some that you've gathered, just to like piece 2 and 2 together. And it's, oh, that didn't work. What about these 2? Maybe. Oh, okay, that's a no. So what about these 2? And then you finally figure it out. That's what I mean when it kind of like just hit a brick wall in terms of the flow for me.
And maybe is a triggersome word when it comes to hitting a brick wall, because it's like, you know or you don't. Just say, I don't know, because some of the spirits say, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, great. I can live with that. You don't have to know. But when you say maybe, you're implying that you could have seen something and you're not remembering. Which one is it, Obama? Sorry.
Yeah, it's all your fault that we're here, Democrats.
Exactly. Well, no, I'm not saying that one. I don't like it. So we do get hints in this game. They are provided by the spirits, but they're provided by a few different means, some of which are items. The scrying mirror provides us with hints, which I didn't hate. Just sometimes the scenes took so long. Backtracking. Rick, you mentioned Jimmy is pursuing us. That is worth mentioning. And Rick also mentioned pointing and clicking to move. So one move at a time, one move per click. That's what we're doing. We're avoiding Jimmy, who's onto our trail, while we are trying to communicate with these spirits. Back to the hints that are provided. We're also given audio hints, so we will hear sounds, whether it is talking, whether it is banging, whether it is Animal from the Muppets. We hear all kinds of noises. The other hints, okay, Animal from the Muppets is not in this game, and I'm sorry. Spoilers, everyone. The other hints that we have are provided by flickering lights, which actually I kind of appreciated that, because I've heard of from many trusted friends and in some own personal experiences that this is a way that the dead actually have communicated. So I thought that was kind of cool. The flickering lights were very intuitive and didn't feel too hand-holdy to me.
Yeah, one of those first audio clues that I got was Jimmy shouting, "You're dead meat." So to me, there was like, all right, you're already starting in the negative. You're going to have to really work your way up. The audio cues were nice, though, because you can sort of gauge how far away he is. So you can, avoid him. And I guess it's about this time we should talk about what exactly happens when you get caught by this maniac. So you're getting chased through this hotel. He's captured your friends. And if he finds you, he bonks you on the head, and that's it.
He whacks you. He whacks you.
When that happened to me, I was prepared for a game over. I was like, all right, I'll just reload my last save. Nope. He just bonks you and then throws you into a room. He doesn't even do anything. And then I was like, okay, maybe under the right conditions. No, I got bonked so many times, and he just kept taking me back to the room. I mean, a different room each time, and he took some items, but like, where are the stakes? Where's the sense of repercussion, consequences?
I don't disagree. I think there should have been more consequence. Some of it makes sense to me, like having keys taken off of you and stuff. That makes sense to me. And Victoria framed it, and this was interesting to me. She said, well, think about it from the standpoint that you're a character. Maya is a woman. You don't know what Jimmy's done to you after you're unconscious. And that's all fine and good. But that's also world building implied by the person playing the game. It's not hard world building. It's not even soft world building. It's, kind of like Star Wars Episode 8 is saved by fan theories, if anything. That's kind of the only argument I have for this, is that, Jimmy is engaged in other nefarious activities while you're unconscious. But that's not implied. You're just put into a room.
And, you have to meet the game where it's at. You have to come to it at its level. And if you are somebody that doesn't mind spending that currency to world build on your own like that, that's fine. But I think most of us don't. And in some ways, it would have almost been better had they implied that he did some real creep shit to you. And that gets into the whole argument of like, well, if you're advocating it for it in art, then you must agree with it, which is the most bullshit argument I've ever heard. Just stay off Twitter, everybody. Stay off Twitter forever.
Except for Penguin's Jesus. Please continue.
It would have been better had they made him seem like a real that creep. That would have given a sense of extra tension, a sense of I don't want to get caught, because when I got caught, I lost maybe a minute because of the jump scare, the dragging down, and then kind of waking up. Maybe a minute's too long. 45 seconds. And then I just had to regather my stuff. And there are plenty of compasses all around. The ghost box is generally easy to find. It just, aside from the jump scare, it never, getting caught was just a minor inconvenience.
If I can be completely honest with you, there came a point, Rick, where I was getting whacked so much that I wasn't even jump scared anymore.
He was getting whacked so much they might as well have called him a Tony Soprano. Hey,
that's right. As long as we mention fictional people, because I don't want the wrong person hearing me right now. But this is what I talk about with the gameplay issues that should have been avoided, was the amount of whacking that he did. You know what I mean?
He's a real wacky boy.
It was no, really, it was absurd. And there was a point last night where I was like, I'm out. I'm not doing this ever again. I'm not playing this game anymore. And then I was like, for all of you who listen to our podcast, I will press on and I will get whacked as many times as it takes. But Rick, you mentioned Twitter. Can I read you something from the Penguins Jesus account real fast?
Please.
So Penguins Jesus shared, it retweeted. Is that what it's called whenever it shares something from another account?
Yes, Ben, that's what it's called.
I only use Twitter to make polls. I don't really touch Twitter, but if you want to see my Twitter, it's I don't know. It's my back end while I'm playing a pipe organ. I don't know. It's me sitting on the bench. Anyway, so Penguins Jesus shares a thing. It says, R.I.P. Phil Kessel. And it's a post from the New York Post, and it says, eating one hot dog takes 35 minutes off life, study suggests. And underneath it's Penguins Jesus saying, Phil Kessel on the study. I was today years old when I found out I died 7 years ago. Wild times we live in, man.
Man, people are still making fun of Phil Kessel.
And those hot dogs, yeah.
Damn.
It's
pretty funny, though.
During the Olympics, you know, Team USA is all watching the other matchups, and everyone's got their protein shakes and their, like, kale bars. And Phil Kessel walks in the room with a plate of nachos with cheese and was like, what's up, everybody?
Man, that's how you do it. Good for him.
I'm sorry.
That's a role model.
Yeah. What can I say? He's with Arizona now, and I think I wish him the very best. So that kind of covers gameplay, Rick. To be honest, that's really what we're doing. Which makes the story, when we get to it, pretty streamlined. I did read, and I hope to God this is true, and I hope to God they improve upon the things that they did lay, the good rail that they laid, that there is a sequel in development.
Interesting. I don't know that I will be one to buy it, but I would be interested to see if and how they develop. And I should say, too, like, I was looking up reviews of this, and the only outright negative reviews I could find were, like, joke reviews on Google, saying something like, well, Markiplier played this, so it's dumb. So, I don't know. I don't want to say fear, because I genuinely don't care, but I wonder if they're going to see the generally 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 stars and just do the same thing again, which for the people that liked it is fine. And I accept that I'm in the minority here, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe not for me.
Oh, and that's okay. You know, you're allowed to have, you know, your own personal feelings on top. You know, you're allowed to be subjective and objective.
It was the year 2000 when SpongeBob delivered upon us the wisdom we don't all have to like the same thing.
And it's been with us ever since. But to talk a little bit about production of the game, because it's been hard to dig this up. I mean, it's a fresh baby boy of a game. Though they started production apparently in 2017. It came out in 2020. It was developed by Baggy Cat Limited, is the developer of this game. And according to their fandom.com, the game runs on an unknown engine. I don't understand, but apparently the video file that is used is called hotel.m4v. I wish I could speak to these things, but I know almost nothing about these things. The actor who played Jimmy, his name is Hold Martha. I forget where he's from precisely, but I have it somewhere. Actually, hold on. Here he is. Hold Martha is from Norway. So our person who played Jimmy is from Norway. How about that?
He looks ridiculous, and we'll talk about that maybe when we get to the story, just because we missed it. But he kind of reminds me of Ted from Scrubs. Do you remember Ted from Scrubs?
Which one is Ted from Scrubs?
Oh, he's the one that's always sad, and he's bald, but he's got hair on the sides, and he's the depressed one.
I'm looking up Ted from Scrubs.
Kind of looks like him if he were dressed up in a ridiculous way.
Yeah, it kind of does look a little bit like Ted from Scrubs.
Let's just get it out of the way now. So the guy that's chasing you, Jimmy, he is wearing these cartoonish suspenders, and has quite possibly the worst bald cap / hairpiece I've ever seen. How would you even describe this?
No, I think that's fair. The bald cap is pretty bad. The hair is a little bit crazy. I mean, it's sort of like the monk cut, but the hair is like probably 5 or 6 inches out on the sides.
It's like Bozo the Clown-esque.
Well, but here's the thing. The place where I will defend this game is the fact that that's part of the character he plays. Though I don't know why he wouldn't tame his hair and then wear a wig, but what do I know? Because so Jimmy has a show at the hotel, which we'll get to, and he plays a character who is Bozo the Clown-esque. But, I mean, the wig was very, very apparent. And that was actually the actor, Huld Martha, said that desk was made out of cardboard and that everything else was basically produced via CGI in that hotel.m4v. Otherwise, I can't find anything on this game.
Yeah, it's a new game. New boy.
Fresh, bouncing, baby boy.
That's what they called me in high school.
It is. Rick, have you do we have any numbers on this game? Because I can't find anything. But I can find the music was composed by and the cinematography was done by a man by the name of Tim Fallon. He did At Dead of Night. He also worked in part on Echo the Dolphin.
Echo the Dolphin, really?
Truly, I tell you. At least I believe he composed the music for that.
Huh. That's interesting. Speaking of music, I'm glad that you brought that up, Ben, because I almost forgot about it. And the reason I almost forgot about it is because there's next to none. There's really not a lot of music in this game. So much so that I think for editing, I might just put in scary music.
You could do the intro music at the beginning that plays whenever the game boots.
Oh, sure.
And then maybe some of that, I don't know, the lobby music at the end of the game whenever it plays the big band, kind of like the end of The Shining.
Is that after you save all of your friends?
Or after you don't save all of them. Hee hee.
Okay, because I was going to say I definitely didn't, and I was like, I'm done.
Yeah, I don't know if it happens if you do or don't necessarily. I just know that if you do save them, the music definitely plays.
But yeah, you might hear some snippets from here. You might hear a little Toten Tons by List. I don't know. List. I can speak.
Or Danse Macabre by Sanson.
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot. Not a lot of List. I listened to Toten Tons a couple times the other day. It's a really great piece. It's probably one of my more favorite List pieces.
Have you heard it played by piano and organ?
No.
I'm sending it to you now. Is there anything else while I send this to you? Is there anything else in this game that you feel the need to talk about in terms of development, production, sales, music, etc.?
I don't think so. I think I bought it for $15 on Steam. It definitely goes on sale. It's not one of those games that will never go on sale. And it's pretty affordable. So if you want to take the plunge and give it a try, you certainly could do worse. It's not a huge time sink. The game itself can be beaten if you really know what you're doing and get lucky in like 3 hours, 3.5, 4 hours maybe. It took me longer. It took me closer to 7, just because I didn't know what I was doing. What else? Yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, I wish there was more information on it, but that's kind of what's exciting about doing a game that's come out this recently is that we don't have much to talk about in that department because people haven't written on it. And the only people that have written on it have written game guides that are obsolete because all of the items move throughout the hotel.
Yeah, instead you just get to hear us talk about our opinions and stuff.
Yeah, and get grumpy and make flirtatious eyes at each other, but you can't hear those.
I think they could hear that one, Ben.
So, Rick, do you want me to start this story? Do you mind?
I don't mind at all. This game does something interesting, though. Instead of starting right on the story, you get a prologue video and a tutorial video. So there is no in-game well, that's not true. There are in-game tutorials in the form of like prompts and stuff, but you're taught how to play the game in an outside video. And I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I know I like it more then I don't know if you were able to talk to Maya's friends and they would say, like, did you know if you click the scrying mirror that you'll be able to see your next objective?
There are a lot of ways to do tutorials right, but that is always the way to do tutorials wrong.
Yes, sir. Anyways, I cut you off.
No.
Please, pick up, start us off, kick us off, sit down with your root beer, get your popcorn, get your roast beef turkey sandwiches, and let's dive into the story of At Dead of Night.
Absolutely. So this game takes place at the Seaview Hotel, which is in jolly old England. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Which is why, Rick, I see you laughing at least. Which is why I had a gin gimlet, because gin, it's a thing. The game actually starts with voices yelling Jimmy's name. Didn't hate this. This made sense to me. It's implied that they are yelling to him through the ghost voice receiver, and you can hear his distress as they're yelling his name. The character you play as, the protagonist, Maya, is walking along this road. She was left behind by her friends, so she's on the phone with him saying, like, where do I go? And the phone's breaking up, but she eventually gets to the hotel. You and your friends are in town for a music festival, and you are going to set up a tent and camp, but as Jimmy ends up saying when you meet him, there's hardly weather for that. We get to the hotel desk, hit the bell. Jimmy pops up from behind the desk, which is made out of cardboard. I just want to say again, and if you do watch this opening sequence, you can see as he touches the desk that things nearly fall off of it, which I love. But Jimmy, he tends the hotel. He's in charge of it. Apparently your friends booked you in. They're nice, fresh faces. Jimmy asks you to come to the entertainment tonight. And when you turn him down, he's very bothered. And he walks away. You take the lift to your room. And he walks away talking about Kids Today and U-Tune and My Face. But then he ends up... I loved that. It was so forced. But I kind of liked it. But he's arguing with himself. We hear him start to say that he's kind of exhausted with himself. This is where it's implied that he's possessed. You get to your room. You're sleeping. You hear a scream. You go to investigate, and your friend is basically being gassed, it looks like, with a towel full of whatever that stuff. I can't remember what it is.
Chloroform.
I was going to say chloroform, and I thought, that ain't it.
Which, fun fact, that stuff wouldn't actually knock you out like in the movies. It would maybe make you dizzy and disorient you for a little bit, but it's also deadly, so don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't. This is an anti-chloroform podcast, everyone, just for the record, and we'll save him for later.
And a pro-whack podcast.
This is 112% and will always be a pro-whack podcast. But Jimmy is gassing one of your friends, saying, that's it, go to sleep. Maya runs to the downstairs, grabs a master key and the ghost receiver. And the ghosts are asking you to expose what Jimmy has done.
Yeah. As soon as you meet Jimmy, he's immediately typographed as the villain, or at least the antagonist. Not just by the way he looks, but he says these really poorly written quips that just scream, I'm the bad guy. His possession that he fights with in the mirror, the ghost that's possessing him, also says a lot of really cheesy lines saying that he doesn't like rude children. They're naughty and they need to be taught a lesson, and things like that. So yeah, that's our antagonist. And that is the prologue that kicks off the game. We don't really need to talk about the intro video that teaches you how to play because we kind of covered all that.
Yes.
But this game, you can kind of discover things in somewhat of a random order. some things won't appear until you find other things. But we're going to kind of just do our best to lay out the story in the way that jives with how we both found it, because we don't want to just go, oh, but backtrack. So we'll do our best. But also, the entire game takes place in the hotel, and the gameplay never changes. So from here on out, it's going to be a lot of story dump, our opinions, and whatnot.
It absolutely will be. Now, to give you a little bit of a visual on how the Seaview Hotel works, there are more or less 5 total floors. We have the lower ground floor, which is the basement, the ground floor, which is where we've entered, the first floor, which is where Maya's room is situated, the second floor, and the third floor. The third floor is lacking in rooms. It's a little bit sparse up there, but the second and first floor are more or less carbon copies of each other, with the exception of a few little snags that aren't necessarily detrimental.
Well, the third floor is the one that's the most different. It's full of dead ends, and it's also darker. So that's where you don't want to be tussling with Jimmy. But speaking of tussling with Jimmy, he only appears on floors 1 through 3. He cannot get you in the basement. And he also cannot go into the stairwell. So those are safe zones. So if you need to catch your breath or what have you, that's where you do it. So the first thing that we need to find is a compass, along with a scrying mirror. I found them both on the first floor because I think that's just where they are. At first, more than half of the rooms are going to be inaccessible to you. If you enter a room that is dark, you cannot search it. You don't have that arrow option. You can just leave. The scrying mirror is just a device in the game to give you hints where to go. It will give you very vague hints as to the story, and will generally give you either a room number or a floor number where to go. The compass points you towards spirit locations. When you find a spirit location where you can use the spook honk box to talk to the ghosts, it kind of spins around and around in a way that compasses shouldn't. You're also finding keys to other locked doors, like the staircase, storage rooms, things like that. And this has a menu similar to the Cat Lady, but you're going to be dealing with a lot more inventory.
And because the game isn't really divided into chapters like Cat Lady is, you have all of your items at once. Like there's no oh yes, I'm going to get rid of all of these, unless Jimmy gets you and gives you a whacking. As Rick was saying, some of the hotel rooms are dark, some of them are not. And in the ones that are light, you can hide from Jimmy should he be approaching your room by either going into the bathroom or into the wardrobe in the room. In the completely darkened rooms, you can only use the bathroom to hide. You can't use the bathroom. Come on, guys. In the rooms, you have desks and you have these chests, these kind of giant boxes on the floor, and these contain the hints, large and small, and some medium-sized as well. That's where that's how we progress things, is by finding the right hints.
And the first major hint that we get is to go to the lower ground floor, where you get your first big jump scare of a little girl outside of the elevator. I'm pretty sure this is for sure the first thing that happens to you.
Yes.
This little girl, you learn, is Amy Bell. You learn that she was the daughter of somebody staying there, and Jimmy was just bullying her. He was an adult that was just bullying a child for no reason. He would take her stuff from her, steal money from her, light her toys on fire, things like that. This is also where you get your first questioning mechanic, pairing them together, that sort of thing. But yeah, this is where we first learned that Jimmy was generally a menace to the people that were staying here.
This is true.
Well, I guess we first learned that whenever he knocks our friend out with chloroform.
Yeah, I mean, but we don't know how far he's gone necessarily. We know that the spirits are trying to communicate, but we don't know everything.
Yeah, we know that he's used chloroform, but stealing money from a little girl, what a monster.
Yeah, so we use that hint. We have the child's purse that we find, and we talk with her about it. There are a number of other items that apply that make her uncomfortable, that also bring up responses. There are a lot that say, I don't know, and she has no idea what's going on. But we progress through her story generally by going to different rooms in the hotel. On the ground floor, we find her again later in the arcade, because there's an arcade in this hotel, where she is frustrated with Jimmy. He's taken one of her toys, and one of the things he's done is he's taken turpentine and a lighter and set her teddy bear on fire, which is concerning on a number of fronts.
Yeah. So do you want to close out Amy's story, or do you want to just kind of go in the order that we found the stuff?
I'm good to kind of go with Amy's story and talk about the hints that we have to use.
Okay, sure.
If that's cool.
Hey, baby, cool as the other side of the pillow. Because I'm a dad and it's 1991.
Hell yeah.
So I don't quite remember to whom we say this, but you find empty whiskey. Well, no, I don't think they're empty. You find a bunch of whiskey, scotch, bourbon, liquor bottles in one of the cabinets. And you're like, all right, let's party. But no partying just yet.
No.
I forget to whom you say this, but you learn that Jimmy was kind of pressuring Amy to drink the liquor, which this wouldn't have bothered me as much, like, even 5 years ago, but what a horrible thing to do to a kid.
Yeah, I mean, he told her that it was medicine, and she said it tasted horrible, because I believe that didn't he hurt her with the sword by accident or something? I thought that he'd hurt her.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, I skipped over that.
No, you're fine. No, there's a lot of clues.
Yeah, if it wasn't enough that he was stealing money from her and lighting her toys on fire, now he's drawing a sword on her. This, in many ways, this poor little girl got the brunt of it. But you find this apparition of her. I think you find one of her just drinking the mystery liquor, and it's clear that she is suffering the effects of being drunk as a child, and it's vile. But then the final apparition of her that you see is her standing at the top of the stairwell, and she falls.
You go to the bottom of this stairwell, and the lights flicker and flash on, and she's dead with a pool of blood coming over the stairs because she thought that she could fly. She felt like light and as if she could fly, and she went over the stairs and took her life without even realizing it. She said, I fell asleep and I couldn't wake up.
Really tragic. Them leading off with this one, because this was the first story that I finished. I don't know if you have to do it that way. I think you do.
Yes.
But very strong to lead off with this one. I didn't feel like the other three stories kind of held up to this one. Yeah, just how horrible to trick a little girl into dying by suicide.
I think that the next death is equally tragic, and it was quite a way to still kind of continue to start the story. But that's how Amy's story ends. She takes her life without realizing it, and it's sad. And this, to be honest, Rick, I think that's what made my rating high, is the fact that there are moments and flows in this game that really just are really well done. And the reason why I literally could never go higher than what I gave it is because of where it fell short. And that's kind of why I lean low. But the next story we have is with a man named Dr. Bose. I'm really sorry to all of my friends in England. Dr. Bose is a clinical psychologist who Rose, who's Jimmy's mother, as we learn, called because Harvey was concerned. He was the former proprietor of the Seaview Hotel. Dr. Bose, real nice guy, just trying to help Jimmy, trying to understand Jimmy, trying to encourage Jimmy to be, communicative, and I don't want to say to be good, because that's not necessarily what it is. Dr. Bose is there to help Jimmy and thus everyone else, but he meets a number of issues. Yeah, Dr. Bose is there to meet with Jimmy, and you can ask him about violent drawings that you find. You can ask him about whiskey bottles and the chef's hat. There's a bottle of diazepam. There's all sorts of things to talk with him about. There's one item that was weird, the washing line that had the rolling pin attached to it. I thought that was strange. But basically, Dr. Bose is there to give Jimmy the benefit of the doubt and to help everybody else. Michael Scott, win, win, win. But it turns out that Jimmy is just going to play jokes and pranks and cause issues for Dr. Bose.
Yeah, Dr. Bose does confirm that Jimmy drew the scary drawings. Jimmy also leaves a dead animal that Dr. Bose finds.
Yes.
So we're pulling from a lot of tropes here at the moment. Then inexplicably, maybe not inexplicably, he also says the chef's hat is Jimmy's, as you mentioned, Ben, because Jimmy told Dr. Bose that he liked to cook, and he makes him a sandwich.
Which is nice. It's a nice gesture. Dr. Bose likes it.
Nice gesture. But Jimmy puts shards of broken glass in the sandwich, just as a little prank because that was his sense of humor. We'll follow the Dr. Bose thread, but we meet another man here named Harvey. He's the hotel owner. We'll get to him in a bit. But we learn from him that Jimmy was trying to tell folks that Dr. Bose was a bad man. What Jimmy did was keep a scrapbook and copied stories from the newspaper about like abusive teachers and abusive adults, and told people that Dr. Bose was hitting him with a paddle and just generally being awful. Dr. Bose tries to explain the lie to Rose, who is Jimmy's mom, and, Rose says, okay, yeah, he was lying, and then tries talking to Jimmy, saying, like, Jimmy, you've been caught in a lie. We can use this as a moment of growth. Like, what are you going to do here? And Jimmy says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to shock you with electrical wiring from this heater.
Yeah.
Or wait, no, was that Harvey? I think
he
shocks
Harvey,
not Dr. Bose. My bad.
No, but, however, after the lie and after Jimmy's behavior doesn't get much better, Dr. Bose has diazepam, which is supposed to help curtail and control some of Jimmy's behavior. At least it is thought to do those sorts of things. And Rick, I want to just say something real fast. You mentioned the animal that Dr. Bose finds with the coil through it. If I'm not mistaken, that in a lot of people, or at least in terms of killing small animals as a young person, can be indicative of sociopathic tendencies. Or so they say.
Yeah, they say the McDonald triad is hurting young animals, wetting the bed, and pyromania. So he checks 2 of the 3 at the very least, as far as we know.
Yeah, I guess so, huh? But Jimmy doesn't want the diazepam. He's very upset about it, and eventually what ends up happening is that Jimmy, with this scrapbook, basically ruins Dr. Bose because he gets the authorities involved. And in the game room from earlier, there's a scene, and that's the other thing I just want to say. We follow this compass around, at the behest of the scrying mirror and the behest of the spirits to find these people. So there's a lot of jump scares, not just from Jimmy popping up and hiding, but also from the spirits materializing before us. We find Dr. Bose in the game room, and the authorities are there to capture him and take him away. And you can see him mentally just beginning to unfurl. You can see the distress. And so one night, he comes back to the hotel on bail.
Yes. So he gets back to the hotel and he decides to take matters into his own hands. At first, I thought this meant that he was going to attack Jimmy, but no. What ends up happening is he also dies by suicide. He sort of fashions a noose around his neck and then affixes it to the elevator, stands outside of the elevator, and then calls the elevator to go up, effectively, snapping his neck and ending his life. Because, and you learn this by talking to him afterwards via the spook honk box, he felt that, he didn't want to put up with Jimmy's torment anymore. He felt like he couldn't win. He was ruined, basically, by this whole ordeal. So he took the way out that he thought made the most sense to him.
And he was going to do that with the drying line and the rolling pin. He was going to take his life that way, but it didn't work. I'm not going to lie, this scene in particular, because it is kinetic, it really kind of shook me, like watching him die. It just, ugh.
Yeah, I thought they framed the scene well, with the lighting too, especially happening on the ground floor. I believe it happens in the basement, but yeah, this was well done. It was well done.
Yeah, and that's just it. They do a lot of these scenes and these stills, these vignettes, I think pretty dang well. And nothing to me felt too... Nothing felt too tacky, though there were some moments where you're like, okay, you don't need to do this, but I digress. This leads to our next spirit, who, Rick, you and I believe, both had him overlap with Dr. Bose, who is Harvey, the Seaview Hotel's proprietor.
Yeah, Hotel Harvey. That's how he existed in my head this whole time.
Yeah, it's Harvey.
Yeah, Harvey always sounds like he's just fucking done with all of this shit when you talk to him.
I love Harvey, I think.
Yeah, so Harvey, as we said, he owns the hotel, and, Jimmy wasn't very nice to him. As I misspoke earlier, he purposely shocks Harvey with this electrical wiring. We learned that Jimmy liked to tinker with electronics. I get the sense that this isn't all that Jimmy did to Harvey, and if that was confirmed, I just didn't write it down, so that's my mistake. But Harvey decides to retaliate by breaking Jimmy's things with a bat, namely his TV and game systems. This tracks with the broken cricket and baseball bats that we find much earlier. We finally know what that's all about. Jimmy decides to retaliate by rigging a literal crossbow to shoot Harvey. Was it in the leg or in the abdomen?
Correct. No, it was the leg, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say abdomen would have killed him. But yeah,
correct.
He lost a PlayStation, so he was like, well, I'm going to rig this literal weapon of murder to shoot you in the leg. So he does that.
Yeah, it gets pretty brutal between Harvey and Jimmy, the back and forth. I did, and that's the thing that keeps me going for this game, is the story. I do like this kind of stuff. Because, like, Jimmy is not of sound mind. I mean, he's going to go toe-to-toe in the best ways. He's, as Harvey says, he's always one step ahead. So he knew exactly what he was doing to Amy. He knew exactly what he was doing to Dr. Bose, and he knows exactly what he's doing to Harvey. So Harvey gets shot in the leg by this rigged contraption in one of the rooms on the second floor. So you go down to the basement because you find these rusty keys, which are this hint. And Harvey's like, yeah, I decided, Jimmy had been hiding out in the basement, so I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine, and locks Jimmy in the boiler room. And Jimmy retaliates by getting the hotel to catch on fire. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he's always one-upping Harvey. Basically, this is turning into a game of destructive chicken. But Jimmy does start that fire. And, there are also a lot of documents down there that they want to save, so he does try to get him out of there. How it progresses is Harvey takes it to the next level by getting a gun, and he goes to confront Jimmy with it, ostensibly to shoot him, I would think. But, as always, Jimmy is a step ahead.
It's true. And you can see that Harvey is struggling with it, that he doesn't want to do it. I mean, he even said, Jimmy, you're going to die in there. Get yourself out of the basement. So you can see that there's a lot of doubt in Harvey that he doesn't want to do these things. But he takes the gun and he goes to the stage where he thinks he's going to find Jimmy and at least confront him, when Harvey is met in the back of the neck with a, quote, ornate dagger, which we learn is actually a letter opener that's been sharpened. So this is the first time that Jimmy has actively killed someone.
Yeah, and the next apparition that we meet, and the final one, is Rose, Jimmy's mom. She tells the police that whole incident that just happened. She tells them that Jimmy acted in self-defense, and from how it's presented, I assume the police just said, oh, okay, and then just didn't follow through, which just boggled me. Like, this man gets murdered with a letter opener, and he also there was a loaded gun involved, and the police were like, "Oh, well, it's self-defense. What are you going to do?" Boggled me.
It can check out, right? Because like, man with a handgun who's dead, kid with a letter opener. Like, if somebody broke into my house and I had a letter opener and they had a gun, and I was like, well, I mean, come on, you know. I don't know if I could kill anyone. Let me be honest. Before we meet Rose, there is an apparition that we can meet on the stage. Rick, would you like to introduce this apparition?
Yeah, this is the first time that anything major of note happens in this theater. We're met with like a magician, and it's not clarified just yet. This is Hugo Punch.
The great Hugo.
Oh, I'm so sorry. The great. I was
going to say,
Hugo.
There's a difference. There's a difference.
The great Hugo. We know that Jimmy has an act, so I think for a time the game wants you to think that this is just Jimmy on the stage doing his little midnight routine. But if you remember, Jimmy describes his midnight routine as comedy, stand-up comedy, essentially. So we're kind of thinking, okay, what's the deal with the magician? I think we've all asked ourselves that at some point in time. What's the deal with the magician? Also, one of my favorite underrated Office lines, Robert California saying, "Why is Jim mistreating the magician?"
Why is Jim treating the magician poorly?
Gets me every yes, that's it. Thank you. Gets me every time. Anyway,
I think of you every time I hear that line.
He is such an underrated. He's in my top 5 of the entire show.
Easily for me too, buddy.
James Spader, man. Ugh,
he's James Spader playing James Spader in The Office. You know what I mean?
Pretty much. So this thread of the magician, the great Hugo, isn't followed up on just yet. Going back to Rose, I had alluded to this earlier. Rose kind of talks to the police. They don't really take any action against Jimmy, although they may have, because Rose says that Jimmy, quote, came home, which I was unsure if that meant he did, like, time in the pokey or, like, just went down to the station or what. But regardless of what he did, Rose said it changed him. He started helping out around the hotel at this point, but this is also where he started doing his comedy act more often. We learned that Hugo Punch, Jimmy's comedy act, was popular with the guests.
Yeah, Rose says that they were making money again because Rose, I guess, has just taken over the hotel with Harvey dying, which was interesting to me that it would just, oh, okay, yeah. The mother of the one who killed the former owner, that's justice or something. Yeah, so Jimmy takes on this new persona named Hugo Punch, which I think it's implied that Hugo is, the spirit that is inhabiting Jimmy.
Yeah, well, it's not implied, it's outright stated, isn't it? I mean, Rose says it's not Jimmy in control anymore.
She says that, but she doesn't say, she says that they're basically the same. Like, there's no difference between them, but I don't think she says Hugo is possessing Jimmy. I didn't get that.
I could have swore that she did.
If she did, I apologize.
I mean, we do know that Jimmy is possessed. We learn later what that means, but I'm sorry. This is it's such a dumbass twist to me.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, and I also get your point. I like it because it functions, but at the same time, give me a little bit more hard world building with how the possession came to be. And I guess the other side is that we learn, and I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit because we're already in this story arc, we're already here, that the great Hugo, we learn, is Jimmy's dad. We learn that through the clues.
Right.
And apparently from the ages of 0 to 2, which I like how specific the game was. They're like, yes, from the ages 0 to 2, Hugo, I don't like that Jimmy was abused, but Hugo abused Jimmy. So they recognized that those were formative years for Jimmy and that it would have influenced him the way that it did.
I guess the reason that I say it's a dumbass twist is because they go through the effort to codify Jimmy as having trauma, showing psychopathic tendencies, just let the guy be a creepy sociopathic killer without the scapegoat of, well, he was possessed, you know? Like they go through the effort to carve him out as like, this is why he is this way, but then it's like, no, he's actually, it's not actually him, you know?
I know exactly what you mean. Spoiler alert, this is a Star Wars thing. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. But like Rey, I'm going to say this all in 20 seconds, so skip ahead 20 seconds. Like Rey, right? She's really powerful. Okay, she's really powerful. It's one thing to make her a Mary Sue, but it's another thing to make her a Palpatine. Like, come on. Like, you didn't need to do both.
That was one of the issues of the sequel trilogy.
Oof. Yeah,
Which overall I liked. I'll say that.
Yeah, I'd give it like probably a 60 or 70, unless
Do you like the sequels more than the prequels?
No, the prequels win for me because I focus on them. I focus on them from Obi-Wan's standpoint, and that's what makes them good.
Yeah, there's not a lot of sand in the sequels either, which
I
is
hate
good.
sand.
It's rough and coarse and just
gets everywhere.
I know everybody rags on Hayden Christensen, and I go back and forth on whether I think he was appropriate for that role. But without fail, when I watch Revenge of the Sith, when he's about to square off with Obi-Wan, he says the line, "Don't make me kill you," and it's said like just like that. It cracks me up every time.
Yeah, no, it cracks me up too. And the only thing that I think saves it, and this is not a fan theory as much as it is a postulation, is that you start to realize how Hayden Christensen starts to talk partway through the second movie. And I think what ends up happening, hear me out, think about the way that Darth Vader speaks. Sometimes the lines are spaced out and sound absurd, and they are like, in my opinion, the Jedi are evil. So what does Hayden Christensen yell in episode 3? In my opinion, the Jedi are evil. You can hear Darth Vader saying that.
It's got the same cadence for sure.
And if it was Darth Vader saying, "Don't make me kill you," like that checks out.
And to be fair, I think any actor trying to emulate the great James Earl Jones is almost certain to fail. How you can't? You just can't.
No one can present it that way. Period.
And I'm sorry for going off on so many tangents in this episode.
This is a good one. This is good,
and the audience. But there's, we're almost done with the story. This was going to be a shorter episode just because of the nature of the game, for better or for worse. But James Earl Jones, the Tonys, used to be more inclusive of actual just theater, not musical theater. And there is a Tony performance of a scene from Fences with James Earl Jones. Gives me chills. Like I called upon that for inspiration when I was playing music all the time. It is so masterful. Like it is the definition of like fearless performance to me. It's
Can
incredible.
You please send it?
I will.
I sent you Edward Allan Moore. You can send me James Earl Jones.
I definitely will. Anyway, we're back. We've talked about Hayden Christensen and James Earl Jones. I think we've done our duty as any good Star Wars little boys do. I think we can get back to Jimmy.
I think we can, which is all of that to say, I get why they made him, have these traumas that shaped him so violently. And I also get why they would possess him, because there comes a point where I think it becomes obvious, like why they did both, but I don't not understand where you're coming from because it feels really forced. Because it's like that'd be like a villain who like that's kind of like those challenges, like, oh, take the red pill and you can run really fast, and take the blue pill and you can fly. You can only choose one. And there's that kid who's like, I took both. Like that's kind of what it feels like. But anyhow, we talk to Rose, and Rose continues to try to justify Jimmy's behavior, but she ends up finding that he's like yelling at himself in the mirror, and he breaks these mirrors. We find those in a trunk. We find a wedding ring, and we find that, because of this wedding ring that Rose was married to the great Hugo. What was the story? Can you help remind me, Rick? There was a goodbye note that Jimmy left for her, and I forgot what compelled him to write her that note. I don't know why it's escaping me. Oh,
yes, this was after the police incident. Jimmy was doing stand-up, and he was getting a little more edgy and vulgar, and he got heckled one night by an audience member, and in response, he tied her up and just left her in a room. Like, didn't actually do anything to her, but tied her up and just put her in there and left. She didn't press charges, but she told the newspapers. And what ended up happening was Jimmy, and this is where the possession thing is like really coming into play, because it, quote, wasn't Jimmy. Jimmy is so upset that he did that he writes a suicide note and tries to drown himself in the bathtub.
Yes, this is true. It's also revealed at this point, or at least close to this point, that Rose wants to tell Jimmy the truth about where Jimmy came from, because everyone has to have the birds and the bees and the look at these. I admittedly, the last part of this game was a bit rushed for me, just in terms of I was trying to finish it. She doesn't phrase it like that, does she? She does not say the birds and the bees. No, not once.
Okay, because like as soon as you said where Jimmy came from, I was like, the birds and the bees?
Bees?
Look at these.
Exactly.
Say goodbye to these, Michael. Arrested Development, baby. So many references in this one. But yes, Rose is sort of struggling with this notion of whether or not to tell Jimmy that the great Hugo is his father. We do find a birth certificate eventually. That's how we kind of set this thread into motion. But Rose, realizing that Hugo, being the abusive person that he is really changing Jimmy, Rose decides to take action.
I did like this part of the story because you had to keep going back to the same room in which you find Rose finding Jimmy in the bathtub. I liked this because you had to keep taking clues back to her. That was cool for me because my compass was broken as hell. And there comes a point where she instructs you to go to the basement. You find the birth certificate, etc. And then she said she was, basically tired of Hugo being the way that Hugo was to Jimmy. And she whacks him and then buries him in cement.
Yeah. She doesn't whack him the way Jimmy whacks you.
No. Ooh.
She's an advanced whacker.
She is a level 5.
She's a master whacker.
Keep it up.
I'm going to leave that in.
Yeah, you better leave that in.
Yeah, no, she kills him and then buries him in the basement. But then she also kills herself.
Yeah, she couldn't live with herself after this, with everything that's happened. She dies by suicide, and it's really rather intense. This jump scare actually did get me, even as late in the game as it is. Yeah, you talk with her about the turpentine and the lighter. Again, it's the second time that the turpentine and the lighter comes back. She sets herself on fire on the second floor of the hotel, and at this point, Jimmy calls to you and invites you to, is it like learn the truth? Like yeah, something like that.
First time Jimmy directly addresses you, where he knows you can hear him in the game, which is cool. Good that they saved it for now.
Yes.
They also pull another huge trope here, because when you go down to the basement, which is a neat scene because you can kind of see the very makeshift burial job that Rose did for Hugo. Jimmy's sort of talking to you from another room, and he says that you and he are destined to be together. so you're not leaving. Why? I don't know. But he comes out to, presumably bonk you or whack you. I don't know what he's trying to do. But he comes out and you lock him in the basement momentarily to escape. And this part did make me chuckle a little bit. You get 5 keys and the game is finally like, time to save your friends.
Like, oh, I couldn't have done this earlier?
And for a second I was like, I forgot all about these people. Like, yeah, this is what sparked this whole thing. Jimmy is attacking my friends. Oh yeah, now it's time. We could probably go. And now that I've talked to ghosts and I, collected baseball bats, I guess we could save our friends' lives.
I've sustained concussions and brain damage, and my friends have been doing God knows what in these rooms while I've been, playing cat and mouse with this person. Yeah, it doesn't entirely check out, but at the same time, you're locked in the hotel, so there's not much you could do, because when you do try to leave, you can't.
Fair, but you would think that 5 heads are certainly better than 1.
You would think, Rick.
Now, one thing, I don't know if I'm misinterpreting this. Does it imply, so I'm getting ahead of myself. This end of the game, you're going to find your 5 friends. You get 5 keys. It'll tell you what rooms they're in. You have to go there. You have to, you just kind of take off the blanket that's over their head and gently wake them up and tell them to leave. And they do. But if you get caught by Jimmy, this is kind of a non-standard game over. Does it imply that he kills you finally? Because it says Jimmy's caught you for the last time or something to that effect.
I don't really know. Because this doesn't exactly check out for me that well. Because all the other times didn't count, and this time does now.
Right. That's what I was saying. Like that verbiage is specific enough that, and the game does end. It tells you can stop or you can reload the final save to save your friends. I assumed that he finally killed you after multiple failed attempts, and also after telling you that you're destined to be together with him forever. I don't know. It felt weird to me.
Yeah, no, it was a little bit weird. But the challenge is fun. You do have to try and fool Jimmy to go to different parts of the hotel. He's very fast, and he apparently does use logic to maneuver about and to move throughout the hotel. But you have to send your friends out safely. If you hear him scream, they've made it safely. If you hear them scream, they got bonked.
Oh, I didn't put that together. This is also the first time that I made use of the mechanic of actually locking Jimmy in a room, which you can do.
I could not do. I didn't know how. Did you trick him into the room? Is that how it worked?
I did it once. So what you have to do is you go, when you see that he's opening the door, you have to wait a beat and then go into the wardrobe. And this will coax him to go either out of the room or in the bathroom. And I didn't, I'll be honest with you, Ben, I just ran out the door, and if he was there, I was just like, I'll get bonked. But if he's in the bathroom, you can run out of the door, quickly use your deadlock key to bolt him in there, and that buys you a couple seconds or maybe a minute of time as he fumbles to get that lock sorted out.
See, I knew you could do it, I just didn't know how.
Literally only did it once.
Oh, good on you. I'm not saying that it's not important, by the way, to give spirits rest. That's important. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have had their closure, stuck betwixt the mortal and celestial planes. But get your friends and get out, you big silly head.
It should have been priority number 1 from the start.
I mean, hello, right? Oh, I have to say, and I'm not one to just make fun of voice acting, but I love the fact that she goes, "Is it Harvey? Is it Dr. Bose?" And then she goes, "Is it Rose?" I don't know why that always, is it Rose? Is it Rose? I can't go any higher pitched. Anyhow, you eventually get all of your friends out, or you don't, and then you yourself have the hotel exit key, but it's not the door you think it is. The exit door is actually down past the kitchen on the ground floor. It's a metal door, and you use it, and you escape, and you as Maya breathe a sigh of relief, and you're like, and then they start playing the theme from Full House. That's not exactly what maybe that's not exactly what happens.
And Dave Coulier comes up on the screen and he's like, "Who was that guy? Should have told him to cut it out." And then the audience laughs.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I will be totally candid. Once I got bonked while I was looking for my friends, I was like, I'm comfortable with ending it here, specifically because the game tells you that you can.
I did. I chose to end it there too.
Yeah,
I've watched enough playthroughs of it. I watched a Markiplier play it, and I loved it. But even his criticisms, as Victoria reminded me, of like just getting whacked too much. It was endlessly frustrating how many times I was getting hit, and it didn't feel like it was AI even anymore. It just kind of felt like we're going to throw in as many jump scares as we can. And I love jump scares, but it was excessive to the point that I wasn't scared anymore.
I didn't watch Markiplier. I did watch somebody, I think his name is 8-Bit Ryan. Again, I'm not a mark for streaming, so opinion withheld. But yeah, there are streams of this available if you choose not to stomach the jump scares.
Yeah. So our ending scene, we see Maya escaping the hotel, and that's all well and good. And it also will cut to a scene, and I'm not sure if this is only if you rescue everybody, but it will cut to a scene where you hear someone crying, and you see who you think is Jimmy. The person crying is Jimmy, and the person approaching Jimmy is Hugo. And he says a line that, let me pull it up. I have it typed here. The line is, "I'm in charge, not you." Hugo says this to Jimmy because Jimmy, you can see, and this is where I'm okay with the possession and the trauma. This is the only place where I feel like it goes well, is the fact that you see in that moment that Jimmy just wants to be like rambunctious and full of life and this entertainer and the charmer that he was whenever you first meet him at the hotel. Like he's creepy kind of, but he's like nice. Like he's still like trying, and then suddenly the switch goes and he becomes Hugo. I kind of felt bad for the traumatized Jimmy in that sense, but that made sense because they actually showed a separation to me, but otherwise it kind of comes off as red and blue pill, But yeah, so that's how it goes. I mean, we have this Jimmy who's kind of plagued by Hugo, and I think it does lend itself to a good sequel, but there are a lot of things I want to see them improve upon. I think there's a lot of good trappings for a good game here, and that's just it. Like there's a lot of places where I think they tried to be innovative, but unfortunately the second mouse gets the cheese, and there are moments when they reach into the bag, but at the same time they were inspired by, it could be seen as like a love letter to The Shining in a sense, which is great. And we should draw from the inspiration of what came before, but I still understand where you're coming from. But that's at dead of night, everybody. It just kind of ends like that. And it ends actually with a Carl Jung quote after it cuts away from Jimmy and Hugo talking about like inside of ourselves is a voice of ours that only comes to us when we sleep, seeing things differently or how we would actually see them.
Yeah, I think it's fine that it is if it is a love letter or if it's just paying its respect to the Titans that came before it, that's fine. And that's okay. I just don't think that automatically makes something good. You know what I mean? I
agree with you entirely. And that's just it. We have not been able to read up enough on this game to know, like, hey, like you ever listen to the music of Mika?
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan, but yeah, I know it.
Well, I go to his page and I see his inspirations are people like Queen and a number of other people, and I was like, I can see this. This makes sense to me, and I can appreciate that you drew inspiration from them. But we don't have any idea about this game.
It still has to stand on its own, though, right? I mean, It does. Mika objectively is a good artist. It's not my cup of tea, but objectively good. It's at dead of night. I think it's more subjective than it is to say like this is just objectively good, like The Shining. Like it's. I think any rational person would say The Shining is objectively good, whether or not you subjectively like it. That's another thing entirely. but I don't think, and it's, to be fair, it's not fair at all to compare At Dead of Night to The Shining. Let's be real. But, it's still, I don't know. It for me, personally, it just doesn't check enough boxes to hold up. I will say that if they do decide to go the sequel route, the thing that I would most like to see is a departure from point and click and either a third or first person free roam kind of thing, similar to Amnesia or Phasmophobia.
I would love a first person. And the only reason I'm comparing it to The Shining, it's not about comparing it as much as it's about saying I think this is probably where they drew inspiration. I think they have to do first person again. That's what I liked about it, because I like first person. I hate third person horror games. They don't do anything for me. First person, they've got to do it again. And the thing is, the game did set out, I think, in a lot of ways to do what it was trying to do. But there's just still a lot of things that left me wanting more and at the same time wanting less.
I think that's a fair assessment of it.
I think you're a fair beauty.
I am a fair young lass.
Yeah, you really are, Rick. That I'm looking at you, and you're looking real fair this evening, Rick.
I like that we're able to... That didn't even throw me. Like, I'm so used to this. I could just keep going. That I like that we're able to talk about games that we both don't agree on, like this or like BioShock Infinite, and talk about it in a way that's not combative or not what's the word? Not taken as an affront on the other's taste. You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean, and the thing is that I recognize that in these ratings, there is a mixture of subjective and objective opinion. And that's, for me, there are games that can be really good. And if I don't like it, I can't give it a 10. At the same time, for me, like with a game like Undertale, I think it sets out and does exactly what it's trying to do. That's why I rated it as high as it does. And I liked it. Now, if we're playing, let's say that, I played Disco Elysium, which I've not played yet. And I'm saving it. That's why I haven't listened to that episode. And let's say that I don't like it, but it's still a good game. I probably couldn't give it a 10 as much as I would most likely give it a 9. Because there's subjectivity has to play into it. How is it playable for you?
Right. And I know we've talked about this before at length, but, that subjectivity is so necessary for anybody that's reviewing any kind of art. Because if subjectivity is not there, then reviews become stale and boring. It's more meaningful to me. You mention all the time you like Video Game Donkey, and I do too, just to be clear. Another one that I like a lot is Scott the Woz, and both of those content creators, those YouTubers, they're not RPG people, right? Like, they don't like RPGs very much. So that means, and I do a lot, but I find their reviews valuable of RPGs because if they say they like one, that means it's probably really good, and it should be on my radar. That doesn't mean that I'm going to throw them out just because, like, they don't like a game that I love. That would be ridiculous, Yeah. So I like it whenever we have episodes like these where we don't feel the same way and we can kind of lay out why we feel that way, because then in the future, one, we can look back and either grow or hold our ground. That's just you and me. And two, anybody listening might say, like, oh, I don't know, like, oh, Ben is really into horror games. He didn't like this horror game. I might pass on that. Or, Rick is not a big first-person shooter fan. He really likes this first-person shooter. Maybe I should check it out. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. But let me just say, I don't like having these conversations where we disagree about things. And I want to just hold my ground on the other side of this. I'm just kidding. No, it's good to have it's good to have similar opinions. That's fine too. But it's okay to have conversations. And I mean, Rick, I hope that I have provided criticisms and shown lights on things that have helped you to see the game in a better light. And at the same time, you've brought up things that have cast a few more shadows on it for me. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I don't think either one of us ever sets out to change the other's opinion. It's just, I value you and I value your feedback and your thought process and your artistic process and vision. So I like hearing your takes on these things. Also, because I really like recommending games and art to people. So, like, I know what you like enough to the point where I could be like, oh, Ben would love this. Ben, you should play this. And then you do play it, and it makes me so happy. That's another conversation.
I love that, too. I don't know what people would generally like, so I kind of keep things to myself. But, like, I just don't know. I feel like...
Well, you knew what I like. You immediately recommended an organ piano orchestration of the list that we talked about earlier.
Oh, I hope you like that.
You know that I like the organ a lot.
I do, but we'll see if you like this particular interpretation, because I like the organ too, but there's some organs that I hear and I'm like, maybe not, guys, maybe.
I thought you were going to say, we'll see if you like this particular organ, and we're back to the whacking.
Oh, wait, what? So, if you like what you hear, and you like what we do, there are a few places where you can follow and keep up with us. Rick, we didn't do our patented spookometer for this game.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
It's a scale of, is it 1 to 5 or 0 to 5?
It's whatever you want it to be.
I give this a middle of the road 2.5 or 3 spookometer out of 5 orange, white, and green variegated looking pumpkins. Because it spooked me. There were a lot of moments where I would turn around and it did give me a good jump and it was kind of scary or unsettling, but only 2.5 or 3. It doesn't fill my cup.
Yeah, and speaking of cups, I give this 2 out of 5 bags of Sprite at the trick-or-treat table.
That's good. That's completely fair. There's a guy in our neighborhood. When we walked up to his house, let me just say we would take pillowcases and get 5 pounds worth of candy every Halloween. We were monsters. But there's this one guy's house. He's friggin' grilling and drinking like, I don't know, Natty Light or like Michelob Ultra. And he turns around, hey, you guys want hot dogs? And every year, we would leave with hot dogs and other things. It was really weird. One time a guy gave us like candy bars that were the size of my forearm and was like, this is what I got when I was little.
That is an unmatchable chaotic energy to offer hot dogs as a trick-or-treat fare.
And Coke and Sprite. That's why you triggered that.
That is an energy that I both aspire to and am terrified of.
It was a lot of energy.
Oh boy. That one, I was not prepared for that. That makes this 29-year-old guy want to go out trick-or-treating again.
Awooga.
You mentioned finding us on the internet. One place that you can do that is the Instagram. We are at Pixel Project Radio Podcast, or you could just search Pixel Project Radio. You'll find us.
You can reach us on the internet emails. That's what it's called now, right? We are pixelprojectradio@gmail.com. Please let us know your thoughts, your feelings. Get in touch with us. We're here for you.
Yeah, we've also got a Twitter at Pixel Project Pod, or no. Yes.
That sounds right, yeah.
Yes, that's right. Significantly less active. We did get a couple of new followers in the past week. Shout out to Dave Jackson, who is just being a real stand-up guy and friend of the show. And we are a friend of theirs, a top 3 podcast. You should go listen. Two last things that I wanted to plug. Please continue going to our Instagram to partake in our poll. It's listener-generated. For the life of me, I do not know how Amnesia lost out to Until Dawn. And in that same round, I do not know how Resident Evil 8 got so demolished.
Few votes.
I do not understand, but you are all the voices, so you can go and make your voice vocal. Give us those mellifluous pipes.
Please. And let me just say, right now, as of this moment, I just want to share with everybody who's going on to the next round, because we're still in round 1, everyone. But as of right now, we're going to have Until Dawn against Outlast, Alien Isolation against BioShock, Silent Hill 2 against The Last of Us, Little Nightmares versus Five Nights at Freddy's, I'm Scared versus Doki Doki Literature Club, Dead Space versus PT, and we're still in the final 8 of the first round. So I'm very excited to see what you guys vote. And in case you didn't know, if you're not voting, your game might be losing. And we're trying to pick the scariest game of all time right here on our podcast. So please contribute. And I also want to say, and I'm not wagging my finger, but I'm also wagging my finger, that we ended up getting a grand total of 36 votes one day. I am certain that we can get ourselves to 40 or 50 votes in one day. I believe in you guys. Help make it happen. We appreciate you. We love you. And we appreciate your opinions, because there's some surprising games on there that we otherwise wouldn't have thought were scary. But if they're scary to you, vote them to the next round.
For sure. And the final thing is our Discord. We have a brand new, fresh Discord. The links are always going to be in the episode descriptions. It is also on our Instagram page. They're set to never expire, so you can always click those, even if you're listening to this 5 years from now. And do it. It's been a lot of fun. Great conversation. A little bit of streaming here and there. It's just a relaxed and chill community, so come be a part of it.
Absolutely. We'll be there. And if you add us, we'll be there and we'll be angry. I'm just kidding. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. Rick, are you ready to go to sleep? I'm almost ready to go to sleep. But no, I've had a great time talking about this game with you at length. Yeah, this has been good. I love the spooky games we're doing.
Yeah, and we're closing out the month next week with Amnesia.
Yeah, we are.
But until then, my name is Rick Firestone.
And my name is Ben Bugale. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.